It is my esteemed privilege to invite His Excellency Werawut Silpar Archer, Minister of Social Development and Human Security, to give keynote speech on impacts of climate change on migration and vulnerable people.
Associate Professor Pavika Sirananaban, Director of the Institute of Asian Studies, Lā lōng kōrn University. Dr. Rachada Chayakub, my dear sister, Director of Asian Research Center for Migration of Lā lōng kōrn University. Emeritus Professor Supang Chantawanit, and Dr. Geraldine Ansat, Chief of Mission to Thailand, International Organization of Migration. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and Sawasdee krab. Well, first of all, may I begin by warmly thanking the organizer, especially my sister, Dr. Rachada Chayakub, for inviting me to this wonderful conference on the occasion of International Migrants Day 2023 under the theme of exploring pathway to migrants inclusion, which, by the way, I'm very new on, and so please forgive me if it's a little edgy what I'm talking about. You have to go back on the speech a bit. Thoiไปหน่อย Well, thoiไปอีก Okay. Well, I can't really go off the script here because my dear colleague is not very familiar with my English yet. But anyway, it is my great honor and pleasure to share with you on the issues of the impact of climate change and the on migration and vulnerable people. It's very related and it's considered one of the most important affairs in the present world, in the current situation. And this conference is very timely as we are going to celebrate the International Migrants Day with the theme of honoring the contributions of migrants and respecting their rights on December 18th, a couple of days from now, which is a special occasion to reflect on the lives of over 280 million people who left their countries in the universal pursuit of opportunity. Maybe you can reduce the volume a little. Okay. Opportunity, dignity, freedom, and of course, a better life. And moreover, the 28th session of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework on Convention of Climate Change, or UNFCCC COP28 in Dubai earlier this month was finalized just a couple of days ago. And therefore, it is our opportunity to update the crucial linkage between climate change and migration. Ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, we are all migrants, either by origins or by destinations, either by voluntary or involuntary. And most of us here are in a safe and orderly fashion, which have become to be a powerful driver for economic growth. Nonetheless, it is undeniable that migration is one of the most challenging aspects for all of us in moving towards the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, especially amidst the current global crises in terms of socio-economic as well as environment. As we've seen from the World Development Report this year on migration, refugees and societies a couple of minutes ago, about 148 million people, or 2.3% of the world's population, lives outside their country of nationality, and it is anticipated that the trend of migration will definitely increase in order to cope with the global economic imbalances, diverging demographic trends, and of course, climate change. However, I'm very confident that if people manage the migration can be driving force for prosperity and could have paved the way towards the achievement of the SDG. Why? Well, because it is apparent that migration has been proven to be beneficial to socio-economic development, not only to their own country of origin, but also the transit and eventually the destination, especially in overcoming the labor shortages. And yet, we also see the migrants still face discriminations, racism, xenophobia, and other human rights violation. They are far too often being treated as an outsider rather than being seen as a human being with, of course, dignity. Harmful and dehumanizing narratives on migration have increasingly permeated politics and media in many countries around the world. And meanwhile, the consequences of climate change, which have been soaring in the recent years, have also forced the plight of vulnerables and displaced people to be more unfortunate than ever. More than 30 years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, was the first report to identify the gravest impacts of climate change on human migration, as millions would be displaced by shoreline erosions, coastal floodings, and severe drought. And now it is a reality. Climate change is real, ladies and gentlemen. It is right here and it is right now. And the threat of climate change has increased globally, which means that the number of climate migrants will grow exponentially. The UNESCO synthesis report on the climate change, displacement, and the right of education this year presents that more than 30 million people globally were recently displaced by natural disasters as a result of climate change. And the Asia-Pacific region accounted for 80% of the global new displacement related to disasters. And moreover, the Adaptation Gap Report this year, prepared by the United Nations Environment Programme, or UNEP, concluded that the world is heading for a 2.5 or even 2.9 degrees Celsius of temperature rising. Many countries, communities, and people will be in deep and lasting trouble. Many countries that are most vulnerable to climate change are both politically and economically fragile. Populations are forced to migrate domestically and across border. Climate change needs no passport, and Mother Nature knows no national borders. Every second, climate change is accelerating, and yet our global climate adaptation is still underfinanced and underprepared, while the investment in this area is inadequate. The devastating adverse impacts on the population, especially the most vulnerable, are invaluable and irreversible. And the bad news is that the Asia-Pacific region, our region, especially in Southeast Asia, is the most vulnerable area in the world to the adverse impact of Mother Nature. Thailand is also unescapable. We are ranked the 9th country in the world in the extreme risk category that is most vulnerable to adverse impacts of climate change. We have been stormed by extreme and unpredictable weather patterns associated with vicious cycles of droughts and floods, which causes loss and damage in terms of human life and economic disruption. The current median probability of a heat wave in Thailand is about 3%. However, earlier this year, ladies and gentlemen, on April 15th, the highest temperature ever recorded in Thailand hit 45.4 degrees Celsius. Mitigation and adaptation to climate change is thus a top priority for the Royal Thai government. Our unwavering commitment to sustainability and building a better world is reflected in the following progress and achievements. First, Thailand attaches great importance to the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We have made significant strides across all 17 goals, particularly on number 13, climate action. In 2022, Thailand received a score of 74.13 out of 100 to finish in the 44th place in the world of the United Nations member states on SDGs. And in Southeast Asia, Thailand ranked first for the 4th consecutive year. Second, at the UNFCCC COP26, Thailand be pledged to achieve our carbon neutrality by 2050 and net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2065. And we've walked the talk, ladies and gentlemen, through the implementation of our long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies, or LTLEDS. The National Adaptation Plan, or NAP, aiming to build adaptive capacity and enhance climate resilience in 6 priority sectors, including water resource management, agriculture and food security, tourism, public health, natural resource management, and of course, human settlements and security is already in place. With the concept of gender equality and social inclusion, or GESI, features embedded in our NAP, the vulnerable groups, which includes all migrants, were able to create effective systems to safeguard themselves from the adverse impact of climate change through their active participation in climate actions at all levels. And third, the government is pushing forward the Climate Change Act to be the legal framework in regulating the climate actions, both mitigation and adaptation, which will eventually pave the way towards a low carbon and sustainable society. And fourth, the Department of Climate Change and Environment was established under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment for the first time in Thailand as a national focal point on climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the good news that the issues of people, lives and livelihoods were discussed during UNFCCC COP28, especially on the implementation of the National Adaptation Plan in highly vulnerable countries, Thailand and many countries in ASEAN included, to strengthen collective actions in building climate resilience at the scale and speed required in those countries, especially at the community level. The Declaration on Climate Relief, Recovery and Peace was endorsed at COP28. Financial support for climate adaptation and resilience was also committed. Those are the political commitments, but in reality, climate emergency is still pushing displaced people around the world. It tears them from their homes, it compounds their crisis in exile and destroyed their homeland, preventing them from even returning. And this harsh reality highlights the way climate emergency exacerbates displacement of human suffering. So today, as a food for thought, allow me to offer some simple thought from my own perspective. First, do we need a punctual actions and adaptation now? And second, should migration due to the impacts of climate change vary by geography, gender, age, and other factors? Third, is migration in the context of climate change disorderly and unregulated? Could it be considered as a positive and proactive adaptation strategy for people affected or to be affected climate change? And fourth, what are the key factors in developing adaptation plan with respond to the issues of migration and displacement, while enhance people's ability to choose to stay in their areas of origin or to live in dignity and safety? Does technology, research and innovation requires? And with those 4 questions, we have to think about the proper answer and act now. We need to work together, as climate change can affect multiple areas of individuals' life. And moreover, migration has legal, economic, and social, political, and cultural implications. And therefore, policymakers, climate scientists, migration experts, and a whole host of other specialists will only find effective responses by working together. In my capacity as the Minister of Social Development and Human Security, I would like to ensure all of you that we shall put our concerted efforts in honoring the contribution of migrants in our socio-economic development, while respecting the rights of all immigrants as a member of human family, especially when confronting with the adverse impact of climate change. I've instructed my colleagues at the Ministry to closely collaborate with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment and other relevant government agencies, as well as all stakeholders, in addressing these very, very important issues. And furthermore, as we are realizing that climate change and the growing frequency and unpredictability of natural disasters will translate into mounting challenges for all of us, especially the vulnerable groups, which include migrants, we are then formulating the pilot project on building resilience to disasters and climate change through social protection, guided by the World Bank Toolkit. The project aims to cover both ex-ante and ex-post social protection measures to mitigate and reduce the impact of disasters and climate change to accelerate recovery. The programs of social protection to respond before a disaster occurs and to contribute to a more agile transition recovery after disaster will be further developed. Gender and social inclusion, or GESI, will certainly be entrenched in every steps of the project development and implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate once again that migrants are also human family. They must be respected without discrimination and irrespective of whether their movement is forced or voluntary or formally authorized. We must do everything possible to include them in the climate actions, both mitigation and, most importantly, adaptation. We must also enhance the inclusion of migrant populations in societies, both in terms of humanitarian imperative and moral, as well as relevant legal obligation. Having said all that, require technology, research and innovatives as the core engine in driving towards this resilience to adverse impact of climate change. We also need greater and closer international collaboration and cooperation, both at the regional and the global levels, in order to ensure that migration due to climate change is safe and orderly. And I thus encourage all of us, both here and online, to celebrate the International Migrants Day this year by sharing our knowledge and experiences and best practices on how migrants and local communities are coming together in jointly tackling challenges and eventually come up with a mutual solution. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no crisis beyond climate change but solidarity. And today and every day, let us work together to safeguard our planet and common humanity and secure the rights and dignity of all. And with that, I'd like to conclude my remark this morning and wish you all, well, a very successful conference. And thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you so much, His Excellency, for the keynote speech inaugurating this important day. I would like to invite Ajahn Ratchada to give a small token of appreciation for His Excellency. His Excellency, please may I invite you back again to the stage. May I please ask His Excellency and Ajahn Ratchada to remain on the stage for the group photo session. Dear panelists, presenters, speakers, moderators, and co-organizers, please join on the stage for the conference group photo. We would really like all the presenters, speakers, panelists, moderators, and co-organizers to be in the group photo. So please join us for the group photo.